Hi, everyone. I'm Krista Neher, CEO of Bootcamp Digital, and I'm really excited to be here to talk about personal branding. The reason that I feel so passionately about personal branding is that I know that it's something that can grow your professional success. And whether you're thinking about short-term things that you want to have happen immediately or your long-term objectives, investing in your personal brand is a long-term investment that will get you results again and again throughout your entire career. So first, congratulations to you for taking the time to join us in this experience so that you can start investing in yourself and grow your results over time. My first question as we dive into the topic is how many of you are already thinking about your personal brand? So you can just say, yes, I've thought about it, or no, not at all. But type into the chat where you're at in your own personal branding journey. Maybe you've not thought about it. Maybe you've been giving it some thought, but it's not where you want it to be. Maybe you're doing a pretty good job, but you want to accelerate. Share with us where you are right now, and that will also help me to give you some tips, regardless of where you are, to help you to grow to that next level. And so it looks like some of you are at beginner stages and some of you are a little more intermediate, which is great because I have lots of excellent content for you, regardless of where you are in this specific journey. So I'll tell you a little bit about me and my journey with personal branding. I've been doing digital marketing now for about 15 years. And I started my career working at a big Fortune 500 company. And when I was there, my personal brand was how I showed up in the office. And that was all that really mattered. Once I started working on an internet startup, I started to realize, man, people are Googling me to learn more about me. And I need to think more deliberately about my personal brand. So I started focusing on my own personal brand at that point. Then I was training businesses on digital marketing and social media. And what I found was that a lot of the people that were coming to my workshops were coaches or authors or photographers or accountants or attorneys. And ultimately, their online presence was about them and their personal brand. And so I started taking the things that I had done and systematizing them to help these people to be able to replicate the success that I had had. And so I've now been teaching personal branding for about 10 years. And a lot of the different career successes that I've had have come directly from my personal brand. So I want to talk to you about those things and give you that roadmap so you can take advantage of this now and begin planning your journey. So before we dive into personal branding, I want to give you a power tip about LinkedIn photos. The reason I love to start with this is because here's a secret for you. You may not have known this, but even recruiters on LinkedIn judge you more by your photo than any of the content in your profile. Think about that. Recruiters are paid for a living to assess people, and even they pay more attention to your photo. So where's your photo now on a scale of 0 or 1, I hate it, to 10? It is amazing. I love it. Where's your photo now? Share your answer in the chat. I'd love to see how you're thinking about your brand. And it looks like we have a lot of 5s, 6s, a couple 7s. Okay, good. Well, there's always opportunity to improve. So I want to share with you some pro tips because I had the opportunity to actually get LinkedIn photo tips directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak, directly from LinkedIn on how to take the best profile photo. And so I want to share those with you. The first tip is to have your chin down. So if you're a selfie wizard, a lot of the times people do this in their selfies because you don't want to have that under chin, right? You don't want these like, ugh. So a lot of people tend to go like this and stick their neck up. But actually, LinkedIn's recommendation is to have your chin down. And the reason for this is that what it does when your chin is down is it makes your eyes look bigger. And so chin down increases the perceived size of your eyes, which increases your connection with your audience. The second thing is drop your shoulders. So if you're a little bit uptight, doesn't look so well, so make sure your shoulders are dropped. The third thing is smile. There have been tons of studies on LinkedIn that show that people make a stronger connection to people who are smiling in their photos. So make sure you're smiling. You can also lean forward. So what leaning forward does is it makes you seem more approachable and welcome to the camera. And then another thing you can try is a side angle. Drop a shoulder and take it from the side. So those are your quick 5 tips to the perfect LinkedIn photo. I'll give you one other tip that's easy to apply no matter what your photo looks like. And it's this. On LinkedIn, your photo, your face, in your photo should take up about 60% of the frame. So some people frame it like almost like this frame that you see me in, where I'm pretty far back. And what happens is on LinkedIn, your image is showing up teeny tiny as a thumbnail all the time. And so people can barely even see your face. So even though an image where your face is taking up most of the real estate may feel a little intense to you, I know it does to me sometimes, this is going to work best for you because in context, people are mostly seeing your image as a small thumbnail, and this way they can really see your face. So already we're only 5 minutes in, and I've given you one actionable tip you can take in order to start to grow your personal brand. Woohoo! So sharing is caring. I have written a book on personal branding called Launch Yourself. It covers all of the most important aspects of personal branding and specifically what you do to take advantage of them. It gives you an exact roadmap. I love to share personal branding with people, and I would love to give you a free copy of the book on behalf of myself and ReadersMagnet. So if you share an idea or insight that you get during the presentation, tag me and or ReadersMagnet. I would love to give you a copy of this book, and we'll choose a winner from today who's sharing the best insight from the presentation. So share an insight that you have somewhere through the presentation, and myself and ReadersMagnet would love to send you a free copy of the book. So let me tell you a little bit about my journey with personal branding. It all started on MySpace. Yes. Now, I don't know how many of you were on MySpace. You can share in the chat. Yes, I was on MySpace and it was totally awesome. But MySpace was where my personal branding journey started. So it was before Facebook. At the time, you had to be in college to get a Facebook account. LinkedIn, I think, hadn't launched yet or was still relatively new. And what happened was people were Googling me and finding my MySpace profile. And if you look at this, you know, it's nothing totally inappropriate, right? I don't generally break the law or do it crazy, but it certainly isn't putting my best foot forward. It certainly isn't building the reputation that I would like to build. And so I thought to myself, as I saw coworkers connecting with me and other people I'd meet at networking events, I thought, you know, is this the way I want them to perceive me? Probably not. Now, this is where I connect with my friends, but then that led me to think, okay, well, what do I want to be known for? What is that stake in the ground that I want for myself? And at the time, I had left my corporate job and I was running marketing for an internet startup. And we were really involved in social media and online marketing. And so I thought, you know, I'm going to start a blog sharing what we're learning about digital marketing because it was new back then. So I started a professional blog where I would share my learnings and insights on what I was doing. Now, I don't know if you can see this in your screen. It's probably a little tiny, but I was so bad at this that my first URL for my professional presence was thisiswhyimhot.wordpress.com. Now, I don't know how many of you remember the song, This Is Why I'm Hot. This is why I'm hot, right? That's what it was after. I thought it was pretty funny at the time. Obviously not really appropriate. So that didn't last too long. And now if you look at me, this is what you'll find. So the reason I wanted to show you all of my horrid mistakes in personal branding is because hopefully what you'll see is that's iterative and it's a bit of a journey. Now, you're probably smarter than I was and are not going to create a professional blog with that horrible of a username. But the idea here is that it's iterative, right? And you're going to get a little bit better over time. But in order for me to even get started, I had to say, well, what do I want to be known for? What is that impression that I want to create? Why would someone want to listen to me? What am I bringing to the table here? And so I had to think about all of that stuff in order to start building my professional brand. And what's amazing is that now when I look back, what I can see quite clearly is that almost all of my big professional accomplishments came from my personal brand. So I'll tell you a story about my search engine results that you can see here, right? So what's amazing is you look at this, all of this information that shows up when you search for my name is stuff that I put on the internet about myself, right? Like I created a website, KristaNeher.com. I manage that Google listing on the side. I manage my Twitter account, my LinkedIn, etc. So all of this is stuff that I choose to put out there. And I did an interview on NPR. This was many years ago. I did an interview on NPR. And a few days later, I get a call on my business line from this woman. And she was like, Krista, I heard your interview on NPR and I Googled you. And I couldn't believe someone as amazing and professionally accomplished as you lives right here in Cincinnati. I would love to get your help on something or other. And I like nearly spit out my coffee. I remember this exact moment, right? I was like, man, like this woman has this impression of me. I don't like, I'm not that big of a deal, right? And I was like, she thinks I'm this like superstar and she's honored that she can talk to me. And I'm like, yes, you are lucky I live there. But in reality, the truth of the matter here is that because of the stuff I put about myself online, you know, it's all true, but I managed that reputation really well. And then her, who doesn't even know me, is Googling me and thinking, oh my gosh, this person is amazing, right? And that is the ultimate success in personal branding. It doesn't have to be about a specific thing, right? But what you want is someone Googles you and they think, oh man, this person is great. I would love to read their book. I would love to see them speak. I would love X, Y, and Z, right? And that's what we're really thinking about with our personal brand. So as I look back to a lot of my professional accomplishments, most of them have directly come from building my personal brand and being deliberate about putting content on the internet about myself. And so what's really interesting is my first book that I wrote, The Social Media Field Guide. I don't know how many years ago I wrote it, probably over 10 years ago. It was self-published. And I also was writing actively on a blog. Then someone saw that and said, hey, you're writing really good content about strategy. And we have a contract for a textbook, but we're textbook writers. We don't really know about social media. Could you be a subject matter expert and join us? Heck yeah. So I wrote the first textbook on social media. Then I self-published my second book, Visual Social Media Marketing. And then I get a call from the dummies people saying, hey, we want to do a book on visual social marketing for dummies. We see that you have this other book. Could you write for us? Heck yeah. And so when I look at my media appearances, my client list, my international speaking, all of these things, what I consistently see, that thread that attaches it, is that I'm sharing ideas, knowledge, and expertise, and I'm putting myself out there. And that is then attracting opportunities to me. And that's exactly what I want to show you how to do today. And I want to show you how to do it in a way that is authentic for you. So sometimes when we think about personal brand, like you might be listening to me right now and saying, well, I don't want to be on news sites. I don't want a textbook deal. I don't want whatever. Great. The thing is, it's about using these principles to guide you to wherever it is you want to be in your journey. And you're going to do it in a way that is authentic to you. So my brand, you can see, right? I make a point to be pretty energetic. Hopefully you're seeing that. But I make a point to be energetic. I have enthusiasm. I also want to be approachable and relatable, right? So I think a lot about my personal brand. Your brand doesn't have to look like mine. And both of us can be successful. The same way this is true of big brands, right? So Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks are both basically doing the same thing, selling caffeine to people, but they do it in very different ways, right? Dunkin' Donuts is relatable, approachable, come and get your coffee and maybe a fun, happy donut while you're there. Starbucks is authoritative. It's the best coffee. It's the most expensive coffee. Well, maybe not anymore, but it's a very different brand look and feel. Both of them can be successful. And what I want you to think about is what is the version of myself that I'm going to put out there that's going to help make my brand successful? Because what we know is that people are looking for you. 1 billion names are Googled every day. Now, I'm going to ask you to do something. Google yourself. So you can open up another browser window and literally go and Google yourself and see what shows up. People are Googling you. I've done a lot of personal branding workshops for corporate groups, right? And what's amazing is within a corporation, they often say, well, we don't want to focus on LinkedIn because it's about internal branding. And I'll ask in a company, how many of you have Googled a coworker? And 95% of people have. So people are Googling you. And you want to think about what shows up. So Google yourself. And then if you're comfortable, share in the chat. Is it okay? Is it great? Is it bad? Is it maybe okay? Good-ish? What do you think of the search results? And what you'll find is that it could be nothing, or it could be great, or where most of us end up is somewhere in the middle. Like, okay, there's nothing terrible, but I could certainly stand a chance to improve. In general, 75% of US adults have Googled themselves, and about half say the results are not positive. Definitely think about whether you view the results are positive for you or not. And what we basically want to do is, so you'll see your starting point now from Googling yourself, but what we want to think about is, what is that brand that you want to build for yourself? And Jeff Bezos said it well, your personal brand is basically what people say about you when you leave the room. And I'm going to give you a way to test the strength of your personal brand. So here's how you can test the strength of your personal brand. The next time you're meeting someone, whether it's virtually or in person, it works better in person, but we're a little limited at the moment. But the next time you meet someone, you introduce yourself, right? And then you wait a little bit and you have someone else go over to this person and say, hey, I saw you talking to Krista. What does she do? And what you want to see is, what does that person remember about how you presented yourself? Now, I learned the hard way that I needed to do this a little bit better. When I first started thinking about my personal brand, I went to a networking event and I was doing social media at the time. That was what I kind of first got known for. But I was really hesitant to pigeonhole myself as a social media person because I thought, well, but I can do corporate branding and I've done this and I've done that. So I had this narrative, this lie in my head about not wanting to pigeonhole myself. And I hear this a lot from people as well. So when I would go out and people say, what do you do? I'd say, well, I do strategic branding. And I also, right now people know me a lot for social media, but I can also build marketing strategies and blah, blah, blah. So at the end, if somebody said, hey, I saw you talking to Krista, what does she do? Somebody might say something to do with marketing. That would be the most likely response. Now, are you going to recommend me for anyone if I do, quote, something to do with marketing? No. But if I had put that stake in the ground and said, I do social media and I was one of the first marketers using Twitter, I've built successful blogs, I've done this, I've done that, then people could have referred me, they could remember what I do, and I could build that reputation. So what you always want to think about in your personal brand, and a good litmus test, is to say, how would somebody else introduce me? What would they say? And am I building that brand consistently? Because at the end of the day, we do business with people we know, we like, and we trust. Those are the 3 elements. And this is true whether it's the product you choose in a store or a person that you choose to follow online or anything in between. We do business with people and we choose products and things that we know, we like, and we trust. Know means we've heard of it before. Familiarity is actually a key component of who we like and who we trust. The second is like. Do you like the person? And this is where, from a personal brand standpoint, you also want to think a little bit about revealing parts of your actual personality, because that's what makes you likable. You may follow some people online. I look at my network and I have a lot of experts in my network. And one of the experts that I follow, he's a genius, super smart. But all of his posts are either promoting himself or they're just like random videos that he shares. I know him and I know he's a nice, kind, humble, smart person. But when I see how he brings his brand to life, there's nothing likable about it because he's not revealing anything about himself, right? And I'm not saying talk about, the train wreck aspects of your life. I certainly don't do that. But you do want to reveal enough to allow people to get to know you. And that's really the key thing that we're thinking about here. So you want people to like you, so you want them to get to know you. And then the third one is establish trust. This is where people want to think you're good at what you do. If you've written a book, they want to assume the book is going to be good because you know what you're talking about, or you're an accomplished writer, or you've put time and energy into your craft, right? But the key to success is thinking about know, like, and trust. All three of these should be a part of the embodiment of your brand that you are going to bring to life. And that's really how you're going to build a strong brand for yourself. One of the other things that I want to mention at this time, we're going to talk at the end about how to sort of amplify your brand, attract an audience, and build your presence online. But one of the things that's interesting, so I was reading this book about sales, right? And this know, like, and trust is a common thing salespeople talk about. What does it take for someone to choose you, right? And so the book was talking about how to make people like you. So I always like to frame why I'm reading a book about how to make people like me, so I don't just sound like a loser at home reading books like, how do I make people like me? So it was within a sales book, but it talks about how do you make people like you? And one of the things they said is that visibility is a huge part of this. So if you meet two people and you like them both the same amount, if you start to see one of those people more, you will like that person more, even if you're not having a positive interaction with them. So even if my interaction is not positive, as long as it isn't negative, just seeing someone more makes me like them more. Think of that for a second. And think about the implications for you as you think about maybe growing an audience and growing credibility with this audience. Visibility is a really key part of this. So first of all, I've just justified your professional social life, so you're welcome. Now I go out like every night, just kidding, but especially not now. But the key is visibility, right? And so we're going to talk specifically about how do we sort of grow visibility, but in a smart and specific way. So as I've mentioned at the beginning, I've been working on and thinking about personal branding for about 15 years. I started teaching people how to do this about 10 years ago. And there are really three key elements in terms of the steps of building your personal brand. And I mentioned before, I started off working at one of the biggest and best marketing companies in the world. I started off my career working at Procter & Gamble. And so P&G is known, they make Tide laundry detergent, Crest, Olay, Pampers, all these amazing brands. And what I did when I started thinking about personal branding was I took the way the biggest brands in the world build themselves and I said, why can't I apply this to a person? Well, I can, and I did. And that's why I came up with this sort of formula. So the first step is define what is your brand all about and what is it that you want to be attracting with this brand. Step two is design. This is where you're going to make your brand stand out and make it compelling and desirable for others. And then step three is amplification and visibility. It doesn't matter if you sit there and come up with the best thing in the world that you want to be known for. If you can't get that in front of people, you're basically talking to an empty room. So let's start with defining your brand. Step one. So get a pen and paper handy. If you haven't already done so, go somewhere, grab a pen and a paper. And I want you to think about what is it that you want? And it could be what you want right now at this exact minute. Maybe a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but think short-term, medium, long-term. Do you want career growth opportunities? Do you want to switch careers? Do you want to sell a book? Do you want to write a book and have people actually buy it? Do you want visibility? Okay, I think we had a little connectivity issue. My apologies. We are back in action. Okay, so what you want to think about is, and get a pen and paper handy, but what you want to think about is what specifically do you want for yourself? So, what are the things that you want for your personal brand? And think about if these are specific things. For example, I want to sell a book. I want to build an audience that wants to buy it. I want to speak at events. I want to be seen as a thought leader in my industry. I want to be seen as a good writer. I want people to connect with me because they think I'm a fantastic storyteller. And over time, I want that to allow me to do workshops on storytelling. Or, what is it that you want? And think as specifically as possible about what it is that you want for yourself. And write these down. And you can think about what you want in the short term, the medium term, and long term. And maybe you don't know, but still just pick a direction that you want to start going in. And get as specific as possible, because what you're going to do is you're going to attract the opportunities if you're specific. And let me give you an example of this. So I've been doing personal branding, I told you, for many years. And I also teach digital marketing strategy. And so I was teaching strategy and I was talking about, okay, sometimes we just say, well, I do social media for a living and I post content about social media. So I'm building awareness for myself as an expert, right? That's what I could say about my social media presence. But I was giving a workshop and I kind of thought, like, I need to challenge myself to be more specific about my use of my personal brand. So sure, I'm on social networks because I want to share all this content and I want to be seen as a thought leader, but what specifically do I actually want? And at the time, I was just getting into paid speaking. And I said, well, I want to do more paid speaking gigs. And so now I had a really specific goal in mind. And what was amazing is then I thought, okay, how do I use my LinkedIn account, my blog, my Twitter, all of these tools I have? How do I use those to get more speaking gigs? And I actually only used two things. I used my blog and I used LinkedIn. And what I did was I wrote blog posts that were about me speaking at events, but I gave social media tips for event organizers because I thought, well, who books people to get paid to speak at events? Meeting at event planners. So then I started being really focused and I would write, okay, I was just at an event and the promoters didn't ask me to use my network at all. I have 200,000 people. Here's 7 things they could have asked me to do that would have grown the visibility of their event. So it was about my expertise. It was also relevant for my target audience. All I did was write blog posts and then I would publish them in LinkedIn groups. And what was amazing is the largest meeting planner network in the world, Meeting Planners International, I had been reaching out to them for a year, trying to do a webinar for them, saying, hey, I'll teach your audience how to do social media for their events better. And they never replied to me. I started doing this and posting in their group. They email me and they're like, you post so much valuable content. Would you do a webinar for us? And I said, yeah, check your inbox. I've emailed you 7 times. No, I said, yes, I would love to. Thank you. But here's what is amazing, right? Is when I was running after the opportunity, it was really hard for me to break through the noise because a lot of people are reaching out to them. Instead, by putting out my knowledge, that opportunity was attracted to me. And then they came to me. The same is true at the beginning. I told you about my book deals. If I had tried to get a dummies deal, I would have pitched them. I'd have put a lot of time and effort in. And I don't know if they would have ultimately, I would have been successful with them. But instead, I was putting out what I'm good at, and they came to me with the opportunity. So the more specific you are about what you want, the more likely you are to be able to attract that. So really try to think as specifically as possible because you can basically attract those types of opportunities if you're strategic and focused. So hopefully you've taken the time to write down at least a couple of ideas here. Step 2 is designing your personal brand. Here we want to think about being compelling and desirable and really packaging our personal brand well. So this is all about really designing your brand in a smart way so that you're being specific and you stand out. One of the things to think about as the backdrop for this stage is that you want to a little bit put a stake in the sand, as they say. You want to a little bit try to be really specific about what it is you do and how it's different from others, because there's a lot of noise out there right now. And what people are going to want to know is what makes you stand out. And one of the best examples that I consistently see of this, and what I always think about, is these like boy bands and girl bands. So I always think about the Spice Girls. You can raise your hand or type in the chat if you know the Spice Girls. What's up? But you look at the Spice Girls, right? And there's like Baby Spice and Sporty Spice and Posh Spice and Scary Spice. And I think the other one was Ginger Spice, actually, which is a little weird. But anyways, they all have different personalities, right? Because if it's just like 5 girls who like to sing, then you're not as into it. So what they do is they take one who's maybe a little more athletic, but they amplify that, right? So the idea of designing your brand isn't to say, if I look at myself, I'm pretty outgoing, but I'm also not. I look at some people's personal brands who are real edgy, right? They're like dropping F-bombs and they're real edgy in terms of how they dress. And I look at that and I know, okay, that's not me. So it's not about finding something else and kind of replicating it. It's finding yourself and looking in yourself and saying, what are some of these things that really make me stand out? And then we kind of put the stake in that and try and amplify it, like the Spice Girls, right? Sporty Spice is probably not the most, she probably likes other things other than sports. But it's that sports thing where they said, okay, let's amplify this aspect of you to help you break through the noise and stand out amongst these other girls in your band. And so that's really what we're thinking about. So there are 4 elements to crafting a strong brand, and these are pulled from the exact way that the largest brands in the world create themselves. The 4 elements are memorable, authentic, different, and educated. So the first one is being memorable. Now, a lot of us think that memorability comes from, we're either inherently memorable or not. But that's not true, really, right? So a lot of people I talk to are like, well, I'm just not very memorable. Okay, well, that would be like saying I'm just not very likable. But as I told you earlier, I read a book about how to make people like you. And guess what? It works. So you can do things to overcome this stuff. So as we think about memorability, one of the most important things here is specificity and simplicity. And I told you earlier about how when I started off introducing myself, I didn't want to say I did social media because I thought, well, I'm pigeonholing myself. But if you don't put that stake in the ground, you can't build a reputation. And so the more specific and simple you are, the more your brand can travel for you. And that's really the judge of a strong brand. I had a friend who was looking for work, and he kind of worked in the same area as me. And I said, I think you're a great person. I would love to help you. What types of jobs are you looking for? And he wrote me back like 3 pages, and it was like really jargon filled. And to be honest, we work in the same area, sort of. I literally could not guess what he thought he did. I couldn't even guess. Does that put me in a position to recommend him for a job? Does that put me in a position to see something he'd be great for and say, ooh, talk to him? No. So you want to be as specific and simple as possible so your brand can travel. A number of years ago, I went to a networking event. And it's called BNI, Business Networking International. And it's basically these networking groups that meet, I think, every week. And within a group, there's typically like an accountant, an insurance adjuster, a florist, a realtor, these different services that most people need. And the idea of the group is it's a referral group. So you join the group and everyone refers business to each other. And the way the meetings start is each person has 60 seconds on a timer to introduce themselves. And what blew my mind, and I thought, man, these people are really smart, is that when the accountant got up to introduce himself, he wasn't just like, hi, I'm John and I'm an accountant. So if you know people who need accountants, send them my way. He said, I'm John, I'm an accountant. And right now I'm having a lot of success with construction companies because I'm specifically able to find them unique write-offs that they don't already know about and some tax loopholes that exist that they may not be aware of. So if you know any construction companies, I would love to talk to them about how I could probably save them on their tax bills at year end. Now, think of the power of the difference there. If he's just an accountant who does accounting, a lot of people need an accountant, but am I going to go out of my way to refer him? Probably not. On the other hand, when he's specific, now I'm thinking, okay, who do I know that's in construction? Because he really could help them. So it's that specific simplicity that really shines through. Another thing that's really vital is that you differentiate yourself. And this could be with a specialization. Like I told you, this accountant, I specialize in construction. But it also can just be thinking about what is it that makes you unique and what's your point of difference. I've been thinking about this more and more, especially for my company, because we don't do a good enough job at this. But really what you want to think about, there's a book I've read called Blue Ocean Strategy. And the idea of Blue Ocean Strategy is what it says is define your market in a way that you can be the EST at something, the best, the fastest, the cheapest, something that ends with EST, right? The best at one aspect. So maybe instead of defining my space as social media, now I'm going to define it as social media training. Now I'm going to define it as online training. And I can say with confidence, we have the deepest and broadest social media training on the market. So what I do is I keep defining until I have this unique point of difference. And it feels maybe pigeonholed, but it's what really makes you stand out. A friend of mine who's a digital marketing genius started a digital marketing company, and it's digital marketing for law firms. Could he take the exact same thing and do it for dentists, lawyers, accountant, or doctors, accountants, whatever? Yes. But by specializing, he's now differentiated, right? And that's what really makes him stand out. And then the third one is educated. You want to make sure that you have credibility around what you're doing. And it could be small things or big things. A lot of credibility will come over time, right? When I introduce myself now, you hear all of these great things, but that was built up over time. When I started, I didn't have as much going for me. What you want to do is if you feel like you don't have the credibility, ask yourself, in a perfect world, what would I want? Would I want some media mentions on this list? Do I want A+ clients? What do I want to have achieved to feel like I have this credibility and then build that in? So I do want to touch on a few of these points in a little more detail. And the first is consistency. You want to make sure that your personal brand is delivered in as consistent a way as possible. So I was looking up a brand recently that was actually on Shark Tank. And I looked them up, and it was really shocking because at some points they were like selling their clothes in a really cool and trendy way. And then there were other posts that clearly came from the business owner that were kind of actually a little politically charged. And I thought, man, this feels like really all over the place to me. And as a professional brand, you want to be as consistent as possible. If you look me up online, I'm going to look really consistent everywhere you look at me. And you'll see the same for those who are really effective at building their personal brands. With the exception of some of these like jailhouse looking type shots, you see Martha Stewart always looking the same. But you see this with other executives and professionals as well. Now, when we talk about consistency, it's easy for me to show you visual consistency, right? Because you can see it and understand it. But you also want consistency in your positioning, in your angle, in the way you bring yourself to life. Because consistency is what breeds memorability. So you want to make sure you're as consistent as possible. You also want to think about doing something memorable. And I show you this lady because I still remember her. And I probably saw her 8 years ago or something. I was in Oklahoma speaking at a women's entrepreneur conference. And this lady has a company that started off selling buns. And she comes out and like attached to her butt is like a plastic butt, like a naked plastic butt, right? Because she built her business selling buns, right? So buns. So she's like, hi, everyone. My name's so-and-so, and I'm going to talk to you today about my buns. And then she like turns around and shows you this plastic butt that she has attached to herself. Super memorable. I actually couldn't remember her name when I wanted to use her as an example. I searched the bun lady and I was able to find her. So think about what are things that are memorable and kind of build on them and use those as a hook. I'm always on the lookout for what are memorable things that work. A friend of mine, his name is Craig Paddock, he lives in Kansas City. When I met him at a networking event, he said, well, he's a little geeky, right? Which is what makes this kind of funny. So he's a little bit geeky. He works in search engine optimization. And he says, well, I'm easy to remember because I'm the coolest guy in Kansas City. And I laughed because he's not very cool. And he said, no, seriously, Google it. And Google doesn't lie. And sure enough, you look up the coolest guy in Kansas City and it's Craig. So it's a little humble. It's a little funny, but it's memorable. And it's a memorable way to find him. I do the same thing with my dad. So this is actually my father, true story. And yes, he is an Elvis impersonator. Actually, tribute artist apparently is the more correct term. So he is an Elvis tribute artist. And back when I was doing social media in a workshop, and this was many years ago, and somebody said, is everyone really on Facebook? Because I don't think it's that big. And I said, well, let me tell you. And I literally opened a browser and my dad had just joined Facebook. And I was like, my dad just joined Facebook. He lives in Canada on a farm and only has dial-up internet. And this man joined Facebook. And then, of course, people were like, is this really your dad? Is he an Elvis? And I'm like, oh, yeah. Also, my dad is an Elvis. And people thought it was really funny. And so then I built on it and I built it into my workshop. Sometimes I use it in personal branding because like my dad is on city council where he lives. He does other things, but yet he chooses to put his face forward as his Elvi impersonating, which is entertaining. And anyways, well, the reason that I kind of used this as a hook in my presentations is one, people laughed, but two, I had used this in a few webinars and things, and I got booked to speak at a produce event in Canada. And when I had my call with the woman, she said, she's like, I heard you on a webinar years ago. And when you showed us your dad as an Elvis, she's like, I was sitting at my desk laughing about it. And like, it was so memorable, right? And so, that's just a bit of a stick or a hook in my presentations, but even in how I come across to people, I want to be as memorable as possible. So I wanted to touch on memorability and consistency because I think those are really important. The other thing that's vital is authenticity. Sometimes we look at other brands and say, ooh, I want to be like that person. I want to be more like them. If you really want to be successful, you need to bring your brand to life in a way that is authentic to you and that feels good to you. Because you'll have a hard time building real connections if you're not actually authentic with people. Something I notice when I look at people online is some of the people in my network are like sort of big names in the sense that like within the digital marketing community, they're very well known. They do keynotes everywhere. People really look up to them. But what I see is problematic for them is that they're never able to really connect with an audience because they either have someone else managing it or they are just posting really surface stuff. And so you never feel like you're connecting to this person. And you've probably seen people like this in the real world, right? Where you meet them and you're like, yeah, they felt real fake. I didn't get a feel for them. So you always want to make sure that your brand is built on your personality and your authenticity. And we said at the beginning, know, like, and trust. And the likability in particular comes from getting to know you, right? Like, why do I show my Elvis dad in presentations, right? One, it's funny because my dad like literally is an Elvis tribute artist. But two, it's this personal connection that's relatable, right? Because everyone's got someone in their family that does something a little embarrassing. So it's building that connection point with the audience that really makes it authentic. So that's something that you definitely want to be thinking about. Now, we have a question in from the audience, which is a great question. And the question is, what do you think about getting negative publicity? So you've heard the expression, there's no such thing as bad publicity. I think it really depends. If you look at how people leverage publicity, there are definitely ways to turn things around and use it to your favor. So I was just coaching a business recently that was doing something on Facebook, and they said, well, it was something they needed to do with an influencer basically. And they said, what if people comment? And I said, well, even if it's a negative comment, they're paying attention at least, and you can easily spin it. So to me, it depends on how and why it's negative, right? If you think about negativity, I showed you Martha Stewart earlier, going to prison. Yeah, that's going to be pretty hard to spin for a brand like hers. Right now, I think everyone's just forgotten it. So the thing to keep in mind is negativity usually only lasts a heartbeat. It feels like forever and agonizing to you, but in the like actual world to other people with many things going on, it doesn't last that long. I would never personally go out of my way for negative publicity because I think it's really time consuming and there's, the upside is questionable. So I wouldn't ever try to get negative publicity. But if I had negative publicity, I would look for ways to spin it in order to sort of get that visibility and use it to my favor. So it depends on how negative we're talking and what we're talking about. But even, I just was on a meeting with someone and they hired a new social media manager. So of course I look her up and believe it or not, she was on American Idol. And she got kicked out. So you could argue it's negative. She got kicked out. But I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, right? Do I mention it? Whatever. So even though it could be perceived as negative, she did get kicked off the show. Not kicked out. She didn't win. But she still has that celebrity and that interest from it. So depends a little on how negative it is. But I wouldn't go out of my way to get negative publicity. If I have it, I would look for how do I capitalize on this and spin this in order to be effective. So even if you look at what a lot of PR companies recommend and things like that, if you have negative publicity, look for ways to spin it. A great example that I would say is there's a business that I work with that is known for not being very friendly to small business. That's the reputation. It's a big brand you've heard of, but they're known for not being very small business friendly. And they could say whatever they want and no one will care. So instead, they just built out all these small business programs. They put their money where their mouth is. And now when it comes up, they say, yeah, look, we understand why people think that. Here's the 10 things we've done to invest in small businesses. So I think you can also look at how is this an opportunity to put your money where your mouth is and get known differently and for something else. So the short answer is I would never seek out negative publicity, but if I'm getting it, I would always ask myself, how do I capitalize on this and flip it so that it's working as a strength for me instead of a weakness? So as you think about the way you're bringing your brand to life online, one of the things that I want to mention is tone of voice and sort of your brand character is what we would call this in traditional brand building. I love to use this example. I already talked about Martha Stewart, but Martha Stewart versus Rachel Ray, right? These are two Facebook posts. Rachel Ray's, and I have to even lean in to read it. So I know the text is small, but Rachel Ray says, we've got Rachel's hubby John's fave dish, carbonara, added saffron and shrimp, make it extra delicious. And then we see Martha Stewart, this classic chicken, I don't know how you say this word, frikazi, turns humble ingredients into a heartiest dinner. Both of them are successful. Both of them do basically the same thing, but they do it in totally different ways. Rachel Ray is the girl next door, totally approachable. Oh, it's my hubby's favorite dish. Martha Stewart is like the sage. This is how to make something, right? She's very authoritative. Both of these can work. The key to success is choosing where you want to be and being consistent and going for it, right? So that's what you really want to think about is which direction do you want to go in and how do you stay consistent? So we have another great question from the audience. How do you stay relevant to the generations after us? I'm an old timer and want to reach millennials. So to me, what it really comes down to is connection points, right? And thinking about how do you build a brand that's relevant with a tone of voice that's relevant, right? And there's lots of different angles that work when you think about how you're going to do this. But the key to success, so a lot of the times we have this story in our head that's untrue, right? The story in your head potentially is, well, I'm an old timer, whatever that means. So millennials are not interested. And that's not actually true, right? That's just the narrative that we're choosing to believe. But if we want it to not be true, right, we can find examples of both. So you could go and find 100 people who are older that young people are not interested in, but I could go and find you 100 people that are older that young people love and aspire to and follow. So the key to success is to really put a stake in the ground around what do you want? So if you want to reach millennials, what do you want? But what is that relevance that you have that you can bring to them? And then how do you bring it to them in a relevant way? I think a lot of the times we see, because millennials, by the way, are not that young anymore. Although you didn't ask millennials, you said generations after us. But like millennials are always brought up, but actually millennials are in their 30s and 40s right now. And if you look at who they read and who they follow, I'm in these book groups and people are still recommending Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, How to Sell Anyone to Anything, Dig Your Well Before It's Thirsty. Like all of these books that were written ages ago are still amongst the most recommended books in the mix with newer stuff. Right? And why are these lasting books? Because they have a message that's relevant for everyone. So if you want to stay relevant, you need to have a message that's relevant and communicate it in a way that's relevant. If I had written, which I didn't obviously, but if I had written How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I wanted to stay relevant, I would come up with How to Win Friends and Influence People Online. Right? That would be my next version. How to win friends and influence people by using videos. How to win friends and influence people in a cluttered online space, right? I would think of how do I take my knowledge set and adapt it so it's relevant? Because at the end of the day, what I see is that great content, relevant content wins the day. And so what you need to think about with exactly like this is a perfect slide for you to ask this question on, because it's with your tone of voice, with your message. How do you adapt it and make it relevant to people today? A lot of the books that I read on business, I was just reading, it's called like the Copywriter's Handbook, and it was written ages ago. You can tell by the examples, they talk about long form copywriting. All of the tips are relevant today. If they would repackage that same book in a way that's maybe easier to read, because we know people are looking a little more for like quick tips now, they could do great. One of the best examples of this is Robert Cialdini. He writes about the art of influence. And his first book is very academic. It's brilliant. It's one of the books I recommend anyone read, but it's called like The Art of Influence, or I think it's just called Influence. But he is like known as like the grandfather of influence. If you look at his next book, it's called something like Getting to Yes. And it's like 50 ways to get people to say yes, right? It's just repackaged to stay relevant for an audience that wants a bit of different content. So that's what I would really look at if I'm trying to reach younger audiences and maintain my relevance, is how do I package my tone of voice and everything in a way that's relevant to them? Because what I find so remarkable is that everyone likes to act like they're reinventing the wheel, right? I read a book called Copywriting Secrets. There's nothing in there that's not been written before by other people, but they make it seem new and all about online. The challenge is a lot of people who've written classic ideas haven't updated the format and the content to help it to flow in a different type of messaging that's more appealing to younger people. And so that's what I would really focus on. Okay, so that brings us to step 3. How do you deliver a personal brand? How do you get this visibility? How do you get in front of more people? The first thing to think about is your elevator pitch. And by the way, if you have any more questions, start typing them in now, because I'm going to sort of give you this segment and then I'll wrap up with any questions that you have. So start typing in any last minute questions you have now, because I'm going to wrap up with this and then I'll answer any questions that have come through. But create an elevator pitch for yourself. Ask yourself, how do I introduce myself to somebody in a way that's meaningful? When I got started in social media, I had gone to my first networking event, and fortunately I was with a friend. And when people would be like, hey, who are you and what do you do? I'd be like, oh, I'm Krista, I do social media. And you know what? No one was very interested in me. I was with a friend and he's introducing me to his friends. And he's like, oh, this is Krista. She's a former executive at Procter & Gamble. And she's actually one of the foremost leaders in social media right now. She created one of the first Twitter accounts and she's like the expert when it comes to this stuff. Suddenly, everyone was interested in me. And I thought to myself, okay, I can't carry this guy with me everywhere. Maybe he has a life. So how can I do what he's doing in a way that's relevant, right? And that's what I needed to figure out. How can I introduce myself like that on my own without him doing it for me? And it takes a while to get comfortable. I had to try on a lot of different things. But that's what we want to get to, is an elevator pitch where you can confidently introduce yourself, bring out some of those made elements. What makes you specific? What's your authenticity in it? What makes other people feel like attracted to your mission? And that's where you're going to start to see things click. I've been working on mine. And to be honest, I don't know that I've got it perfect yet. I've been thinking about it for 10 years. It goes through phases. But if I think of myself, right, I want to change people's lives and businesses' trajectories by educating them on digital marketing so that they can get better results for themselves. And I'm passionate about this because I believe that this knowledge can change lives and businesses, right? That's maybe a little mission heavy. So maybe I got to think about how do I put in some of my proof points, but you see the idea here. And one of the things that Simon Sinek says, if you've never watched Simon Sinek's TED Talk, it's a great use of 15 minutes, but it's about helping people connect with your why, right? What you do, I do digital marketing training. How I do it, I'm able to make things tangible and practical for people, but why I do it is what's really going to bring that connection. So think about your elevator pitch as what do you do, how do you do it, and why do you do it? And that's where you'll start to see success there. So what are the actionable things that you can do to start growing your visibility online? First, Google yourself. You've already done that. 2, look at your social networks and see what's there. When I audited my Instagram a number of years ago, I found it was all these pictures of alcohol. And it was because like, look, this martini is beautiful, obviously, but I wasn't really serving myself well because that's not the brands that I want to build. So by looking at it and realizing, oh man, it's all alcohol, I was then able to say, okay, let me broaden this a little bit so that I'm able to build a more sort of, how would I put it? It's not that I never post alcohol, but I want to build a more balanced brand around what it is that I'm doing overall. So the first step is to audit yourself. The second step is to build your presence. And when it comes to online, there's lots of different things that you can do. My best advice for you is to choose 1, maybe 2 platforms and nail them. Where most social media and digital experts get it wrong is making people think they need to be everywhere. Because what happens is you do a mediocre job everywhere. And you will unquestionably get better results by nailing one thing than doing many things. Do you think the person making $1 million on YouTube cares about their LinkedIn profile? No. Do you think the sales rep nailing it on LinkedIn with a flow of leads coming in cares about their Instagram profile? No. Do you think the Instagram influencer who's getting tons and tons of sponsorships on Instagram cares about Facebook? No. So think about where you want to build audience that's relevant to you and your brand and really nail that one platform. And that's where you'll be able to build an audience that's following you, attracted to you, and connected with you to amplify your message over time. For most businesses, this is going to tend to be LinkedIn. And so definitely think of LinkedIn as where you're going to be able to maximize that impact. So one of the things that I want you to do is I've given you sort of the roadmap: define, design, deliver. Don't make excuses. Don't wait till you're perfect, and don't delay. Here's the thing about personal branding. I've been doing this for 10 years and I'm always, ooh, I see this person doing this. That's smart. Let me pull that in. Yeah, I know my mission's not great. Let me try it again today. I'm feeling creative, right? You're going to iterate and get better and better. But what you don't want to do is wait for perfection and give yourself excuses to not be getting results. So with that, you guys had great questions during this. If you do have any other questions that come up, definitely feel free to reach out to me. You can send me an email. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. You can also follow my company, Bootcamp Digital. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to understand what your challenges are and how I might be able to help. So with that, Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a great day. I know there's lots of other outstanding sessions for you, so stay tuned. Thank you for joining, and hopefully I'll connect with you online. Thanks, everyone.